Alright, these are the Samsung Galaxy Buds 1 Pro. These are a really good pair of earbuds, and I've been using these for about a year and 8 months without even really thinking about it. I got them last January, and they've just been in my pocket and in my ears pretty much day in, day out since I got them, and I haven't really thought of reviewing them, so that's exactly what we're doing today. Obviously, buying links, everything, pinned comment, description, you know the drill by now. This is Galaxy Buds Pro 1st gen in 2023. Let's do it. So when you pick these up, you're looking at some pretty much standard affair, truly wireless pebbles, I guess. They're well put together, they feel sturdy, they're compact, they're nicely made, they feel nice and dense but not too heavy. I'd say they're even at risk of being a little understated, but I definitely wouldn't call these boring looking earbuds. They do also just blend in quite nicely, which, let's face it, you're probably going to want them to. There's nothing sticking out here, although there's obviously the split between the shiny outside and the matte inside, and no, it's not metal on the outside, it's also polycarbonate plastic, which surprised me. I thought it was metal the entire time. Regardless, you're never going to keep these looking shiny, because the metallic part is pretty much as glossy as it gets. In and around these openings, there's a total of 4 mics dotted around each bud, which handle the noise cancelling and the voice pickup, and this little vent on the outside to relieve ear pressure when using the ANC, which I'll come back to later. Okay, the takeaway here on the design front is the Buds Pro are clean, they feel high-end, they're premium, they use good materials, and since I've tried not to drop them for the last year and a half, and for the most part succeeded, they've held up pretty well as well. There's not that many dents on them, there are a couple, but they're pretty negligible. As far as actual material wear goes, they've barely worn at all. That being said, they've fallen on concrete and landed in a bagel and they're fine. So yeah, my seal of approval is very comprehensive. My day-by-day experience hasn't been the smoothest sailing, like I'd want to report with these. Let's start with the ear tips. They're all silicone, they feel high quality, and there's 3 different sizes in the box. And I've had the thick boy ones equipped for like 95% of my usage because they're the most reliable fit. That being said, I can barely tell these and the medium tips apart. I've probably mixed and matched them a bunch of times by now. Initially there's a bit of a learning curve when you're trying to get these in your ears. I found, and Samsung says as well, that it's more of a twisting motion to get them in your ears, and I found that works, and it's just sort of, you know, put it in and then yeah, there you go, stays in. So the seal can be pretty good for my usage, but I've had so many times where I've popped them in, and particularly when my ears were dry, they'd come loose within literally 2 minutes, so I had to take them out and then sort of squash my ear about a bit and then put them back in, and hopefully they'd stay. I think annoyingly for me, they just haven't stayed in as well as they should have done. And this might just be down to my ears and their shape, but I've had to walk around with these in looking grumpy as shit. Because if I even smile or move my face at all, you know, they will just dislodge themselves. Funnily enough though, I've also done some gym sessions with these and they've stayed in perfectly, so I really couldn't tell you the secret to getting these to stay in. On the upside, these ear tips are very comfortable once you do get them in, but they have also got these little plastic meshes at the bottom, which have over time cracked from some over-aggressive squeezing on my part. But they do a stellar job of keeping wax and dust out of the actual bud meshes themselves. These earbuds are also supremely comfortable if you leave them in for like 2 or 3 hours at a time. Genuinely no fatigue at all. I've done a lot of 2-hour trips to and from uni, taking these out once or twice each way with just no itches, discomfort, anything. So on that front, they are top tier. Oh, and on my laptop, I've seen a pretty slight but consistent delay between audio and video, so I've had to reconnect the buds, which is a little frustrating. These buds are also weirdly susceptible to Bluetooth interference, and despite them having pretty good physical range from your phone when they're connected, I've had way too many instances of the sound just glitching out when I'm in public around, you know, other devices, so I gotta talk about it. Let's talk wins for these. Sound. So each bud's got 2 drivers, an 11mm woofer and a 6.5mm tweeter, and altogether, in the least technical summary I can give of these, they sound straight up top notch. I've never had an issue with the sound out of these, bar maybe me liking a little bit more bass, but you know, that's personal preference. And you can adjust that in the Buds app, which I'll get back to later on. For now though, they're ticking all the boxes. They, to me, sound almost like a slightly narrower soundstage version of my WH-1000XM3s, which is probably the biggest compliment I can give them, because those Sonys still sound phenomenal, and I've raved about them a lot. The Buds seriously have everything. The vocal clarity's here, the separation's here, the low end punches, the high end, got it. There's nothing lacking, except they're maybe a bit treble heavy out the box. Again, fixed in the app, we'll get to that. Still, I've got a pretty varied taste from UK drill to lo-fi, and these keep up brilliantly, so no complaints. But they're still, you know, not perfect. I've had these on near enough 90% volume for the majority of the time I've used them, and I wish they got a bit louder, because especially on commutes when there's a lot of background noise, you know, I'll take one of the Buds out, because it's just quicker than, you know, open my phone, find the Wearable app, toggle ambient sound. That's too long. I just don't have the energy. Then again, if one or both Buds are in, you unlock the active noise cancelling, which is also pretty solid. I did again logically compare these to my Sonys, and to sum it up, the ANC isn't as aggressive as those, but in most cases it's still comparable and it filters out all the harshest stuff in the background. I think after using it constantly you sort of forget that it's even working, and for the Buds Pro that means that it's again reliable, thorough, and you can run with ANC on for a couple hours at a time, and there's none of that inner ear pressure that gets uncomfortable, which I appreciate. It's not heavy feeling ANC, but it's a nice balance between being actually effective and doing something and not overwhelming. Wind noise is handled superbly on these. They do fall apart slightly in head-on high winds, but for almost all scenarios, they're genuinely effective. On the sides of the Buds, you're seeing tap gestures, and I've also had a pretty mixed bag with these as well. They are helpful if you can get them working consistently, but that is the key bit missing here, consistency. On the Buds Pro, a single tap is play pause, a double tap is skip forward, and a triple tap skips back. Maybe 80% of the time they're fine, but sometimes a triple tap will only double tap and a double tap will only single tap, which for a heavy Q user on Spotify like me, does mean I gotta redo my song lineup, which sometimes is pretty frustrating. Otherwise, the long presses have been fine. I've had them on volume control duty since day one, but you can switch them over to flicking between ambient sound and ANC, or triggering voice commands, or swapping playlists on Spotify, which is sick. Then, coming back to the Wearable app, it's been a nice experience. There are a load of settings in here for the Buds, and I would be lying if I said I've tested and used all of them. I honestly just downloaded the app and the Buds Pro plugin, and slapped on the bass boost preset, and called it a day. But of everything here, I've spent most of my time on the noise controls and the earbuds settings themselves, so let's talk about those. I've defaulted to having the ANC on the high setting, but I recently dug up the ambient sound customization, which lets you dial in the ambience for each Bud individually. Either way, the ambient mode is fine, but the noise cancelling is definitely the standout here. Like, I'm not saying that the ambient mics sound bad, they don't, they just seem to focus a lot on clarity and getting the high end right, and kind of end up neglecting the other areas of the sound which are passing through. The softer mode for these is definitely more natural sounding, and I prefer it, but it still doesn't pick up as many mid-tones and lower tones as I'd want it to. These are very much still in your ears, and you know, you're not going to forget that you're wearing them. Flip side of this high-end pickup is the cool quality sounds super crisp and keeps voices at the forefront, which is what you want exactly, especially when you're outside. Despite the tiny batteries in the Buds themselves and the slightly bigger one in the case, I've actually still been getting really decent endurance from these guys, even after, you know, a year and 8 months. I can't really guesstimate from the times I've run them completely flat, maybe 4.5, 5 hours of battery life with ANC on for these guys, which is surprisingly what Samsung themselves actually claim you'll get as well. So for the first time in history, might have actually got what the manufacturer tested themselves, which barely ever happens. So yeah, I've stayed impressed. They drain more quickly as you get nearer 0%, but I've only seen that a few times since the case keeps them topped up, obviously, and gets you about 2 and a bit more full charges on its own. Charging speeds on the buds aren't really a concern for me. I mean, obviously it does matter to some people, so with a 15-watt Samsung brick that I've been using for maybe a year and a bit while I use these, I've been getting maybe 2 hours to as low as like an hour and 40 minutes to fully charge these guys, which is pretty slow all things considered, but honestly I just chuck these guys on a wireless charger overnight and let them slowly top up. And luckily the battery capacities here have held their charges really well over time in all kinds of weather conditions, so that's another bonus. Either way then, a strong year and a half on, these are worry free on battery life. No question about it. So what's left? Well, the case. And yeah. Hopefully now the title makes sense. It's a shame because the buds themselves, you know, they're nicely put together, they feel high quality, they feel well built. And Samsung went and enclosed them in this little ring box, which granted doesn't look the worst, but it's just kind of tacky. Let me explain. This case, first off, feels like it's made from a lower grade plastic than the polycarbonate on the actual buds. As far as I can tell, it's not, but for whatever reason, it feels noticeably cheaper. The case has or had a strong matte finish on it, but over time it's worn quite a bit smoother and hasn't held up too well. It doesn't do the worst with fingerprints, but has also got kinda slippery. Hence why it skipped my pocket and met the floor at least several times. It's also sustained a pretty huge crack on the side, which got big enough to reach the underside, so it feels like a matter of time before I gotta replace it. The case also acts like a mini catapult sometimes when it's dropped, which sends the buds flying, and I don't know if this is better for them since they'll maybe be cushioned a bit, but it also means they're not exactly protected either, which I mean is half the point of, you know, having a case. So the construction on the outside at least is pretty weak, and so's the hinge. It's okay when it's open, but it's just so damn creaky. I don't know why, there's a crazy amount of give here, almost like it's loose when it's shut. To redeem a couple points here though, the inside feels a bit more solid. I like the look and placement of these LED battery indicators, and luckily the snap is pretty satisfying. And that brings us to whether the Galaxy Buds Pro, the first gen ones, are still worth it in 2023, and it's, for me, an easy yes. These guys sound top notch, their noise cancelling is great, they look really nice, which was a big consideration when I bought them. They're comfortable, they themselves are premium and hold up nicely, and the case is, well, the weakest link. But hey, go out and grab a pair for under £150 here in the UK because they're a couple years old, and with the money left over, buy a protective cover for the case so it doesn't crack, and problem solved. Anyways, that's been it. Cheers for stopping by, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.